Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome everybody. We live? Welcome everybody. We are finishing up the 11th chapter of the Gita. And so, I think it's a... hey, good to see you. I think as just a recap and an intro, the 10th chapter of the Gita finds Arjuna, our hero, asking Krishna, both doors, the outside and that one. Thank you. Finds Arjuna asking Krishna, how can I practically know and experience you in this world? And it's a valuable question, because generally we try to make logical arguments for God's existence, and we also we make philosophical arguments as well. But it's not as simple as just a habeas corpus, present the body prima facie, at first glance, here it is. And so, at least when you're starting to think about divinity and spirituality, it is somewhat abstract. That doesn't mean it's illogical. It doesn't mean it's merely based on faith. It doesn't mean it doesn't have good reason behind it. But you do have to stretch. I mean, my wife's gotten into vegan perfumes as of late, which, I'm a fan, so I like perfumes, so I'm also now officially a fan of perfumes, and obviously everything we do is going to be vegan. When you make a perfume, you have your high notes and your medium notes and your bass notes. And when you listen to people talk about perfumes or wines, which is something I have no experience of, perfumes, very limited experience of. But you're trying to smell a perfume, and they're saying the first note's going to hit you is going to be like jasmine and rose, and then beneath that you're going to find your citrus, and then below that there's a musk, like a base note, like a musk. I have no clue what they're talking about. I think they're just lying. They're just making stuff up, there's notes of aged oak, and you know what I mean, and seagrass, and it's just like I have no idea what they're even talking about. But if you take something that I have a relatively serious background is, like jiu-jitsu, and you show me, two men hugging each other on the ground, looks like they're cuddling to most people, there's all sorts of stuff I notice. Somebody's trying to get their hand fighting, they're grip fighting, there's arm drags. There's all sorts of things going on that most people don't notice, that I do notice because I have a fairly serious background in jiu-jitsu. And so I can watch something and there's very little movement going on. Very little movement. Someone's trying to go inverted and take somebody else's back, and they're just fighting for that initial, anyway, I can talk about it, I have a language for it. I can see where things are going. Sometimes the commentators will be commentating on a match, and they won't be as trained as I am, and I'll call out the stuff that they're going to say like 5 seconds before they say it, and I'm thinking I should just have these guys' job. So there are things in, what to speak of something like the Gita. I can look at a verse and, for one person it says one thing, but somebody else looks at it, they see so much more. And then if you let them, they'll show it to you, and you can learn it. Just because you can't immediately grasp something in the first 5 seconds you behold it, doesn't mean it's not there and you can't find evidence for it and you can't experience it. It just might take a little bit of extra work. And that's true for anything with a medium level of complication. You paying attention? No, you weren't. You're spacing out. This isn't space out time. It's pay attention time. Just because you can't immediately make sense out of something in the first 5 seconds doesn't mean that there's not a logic, a rhyme, a reason, or evidence. Doesn't mean you won't be able to experience it. It just means that certain things have a medium level, a fair to midland level of complexity, and it takes a little bit more than 5 seconds to grasp it. How to make donuts. How to worship the deities. I mean, there's so many people we have, they dress the deities, they spend years of their life, and they don't really know what they're doing. They can't get it right. Other people have that je ne sais quoi, that something that cannot be said, and they dress the deities. But if you look at it, you can say, see what you did here, see what you did here, see what you did. You can point it all out. It's there. You just might not have the eyes to see it. When I first came to the temple, I didn't even know they had deities. I saw colors, like on the altar. I knew there was some kind of altar thing going on, but I didn't know there were deities. I went to the temple for a program, sat in front of the deities for an hour, and didn't actually notice that there were deities in the temple. Knew there was an altar, but somehow in my mind, altars was like a Christian altar with, different, pieces of carved wood and such, but no actual statues. And so it didn't register. They say when they first took planes, and they had planes visiting Micronesia and such, the locals couldn't actually see them because it was just so far outside of their worldview. I don't think that's true. There's the cargo cults of the Pacific South. Do you guys know about this? During World War II, Japan and the U.S. had a massive war which raged over the Pacific, specifically over like Midway Island and Guam and these other spots that are in between Asia and the U.S. So you had to have a base there because you had to refuel. You had to use that as a staging ground for planes to fly. There's just not a whole lot going on. It's one of the reasons why Japan tried to knock out Hawaii. There's just only so many islands in the Pacific in between the U.S. and Asia. Does that make sense? And so the control of those islands is essential because you can't like just fly those, especially then you couldn't fly those long distances. You had to, kind of skip, and then you could stage, and you could, fly less distance and make it back. So, like the kamikazes didn't have gas to make it back; they just got out here and they crashed. So, there was the cargo cults where the people in those countries who had never before seen post-industrial or industrialized civilization. And all of a sudden, we invaded their islands. They're wearing like grass skirts and, using spears. And all of a sudden, we're there with tanks and jeeps and airplanes and refrigerators and submachine guns. It was just mind-blowing. Anyway, there's some debate over how much of this was exaggerated, but they saw people in uniforms talking into telephones and walkie-talkies and summoning up planes, and then those planes were filled with food and water and clothing and stuff. And it was just so mind-boggling to them that they made a religion out of it. And so they would carve planes and walkie-talkies out of bamboo and coconut trees and stuff like that. And they would engage in the ritual acts, ritualizing what they saw the U.S. soldiers doing, assuming that meant that the goods would be brought to their island. But they didn't realize there was electricity and an industrialized nation behind that, and there was, they just assumed this was like, oh, if you do this ritual, if you move in this way, then you'll get that thing. Did you guys follow that? So that, you can Google it, cargo cults. It's a real thing. And so there's a whole bunch of literature about it. It's really wild. But that would seem to fly in the face of the idea that people couldn't see the planes because they weren't trained to see them. You follow? So I'm like a little bit doubtful about that Facebook anecdote. I don't know if it's actually true or not. I don't know how they would be able to prove that when they first flew over those islands, that people couldn't see them because their minds couldn't expand to see it. I don't know how they would demonstrate that or prove that logically. So it sounds cool, but maybe a better example would be that optical illusions work, because sometimes you even know it's an optical illusion and you can't see it right because your brain is designed to see patterns and make sense out of patterns. And so things may be there in reality. There may be a way to demonstrate them. They may be provable. Just because it doesn't make sense to you in 5 minutes or less doesn't mean that those people don't know what they're talking about. When you're dealing with something with a significant enough degree of complexity, it may take you some time to be able to see what others see. Like I remember when I was studying gemology, and the gemologists would say, can you see those fissures? Can you see this? Can you see that? And it took a long time to learn how to see that stuff through a microscope, through a loop. It was there. And then when you can see it, you can't unsee it. It's like riding a bike. There's a basic balance that you get, and then you know how to ride a bike. Other people don't. It's bewildering to them. Learning how to trill your R's. It's out there. You can learn how to do it, but it doesn't come just immediately in 5 seconds. It takes some work. And so I think what we're dealing with when you're dealing with things that are significantly complex or reasonably complex is you get a good enough hypothesis that and you're interested enough in the subject matter that you put some time in. I mean, to really compare apples to apples, we would have to compare getting to know Krishna to be like getting to know a person. And you don't meet somebody and within 5 minutes know them and trust them and develop confidence in them. It takes some time. It takes some effort. And so, if Krishna is a person, a transcendent being, a cause of all causes, and it takes some time to develop a relationship enough to witness that and experience him, I think that's reasonable. If you give somebody a hypothesis which is just unworkable and and you're not interested in the subject matter, then there's no reason to investigate at all. But provided people can make sense at the beginning, make a compelling case, you're interested in it, you're intrigued by it, then you put the time in, and you try to take something which is abstract and make it concrete, something which is theoretical and make it practical. Sometimes you meet somebody online. You're not sure if you're being catfished. You know what the term catfish means? You do, right? It's funny, isn't it? It's such a common term, everybody knows what it is. So you don't know, you're not sure. You think the person looks like all their pictures, but you can't know for. It's almost like, can you send me a photo of you holding a newspaper? There's different ways you try to figure it out and figure out what we're dealing with. But there's some good faith. You start, and then over time you expect that, eventually they'll call you on the phone and talk to you, and then eventually you'll meet up, and you're hoping those photos of him aren't like 8 years old and he's put on 60 pounds, and you're hoping, the person looks relatively like how they present. But it doesn't all happen at once. It takes some time. So Arjuna was interested in the subject of Krishna, and he didn't want to go off and get lost in the world and get bewildered by the world. And so he asked Krishna, how can I know you in this world? And Krishna gave him some really nice food for thought, some stimuli, some ways to reframe the way he looks at the world. When you see something powerful or beautiful or profound or deep or awe-striking, or even awe-striking in the sense of terrible and awe-striking due to its terribleness, then that you're witnessing the fingerprints of divinity in this world. And Krishna is the essence of all things and the best of all things. And so it's a good starting point. And then eventually Arjuna moved past that theoretical come philosophical, that hypothetical come experimental understanding. And he really wanted to fully fathom and grasp and witness Krishna. And that's reasonable. People like to keep God in the theoretical, I think honestly because they don't believe in God. And so they think theoretical and hypothetical and logical and philosophical is as good as it gets. So they just keep it as abstract as possible. Arjuna wasn't like that. He wanted to then eventually experience Krishna. So the 10th chapter was the things in this world that are stimuli, and in the 11th chapter he actually asked, give me a divine revelation. And then Krishna showed him the universal form, God as the universe. And Arjuna was able to see everything that ever existed in one place at one time without obstacle. Like 1,000 suns rising at once. And that Vishva-rup, the form of divinity as the universe, then became the Kala-rup. Kala is God as time. Now when we say God as time, we mean God as decay and death. The fancy word for decay is entropy. Entropy, as things move from an organized to a chaotic state, as things wind down in a closed system. But practically speaking, we experience entropy as old age, disease, and death, as decay, as the temporal nature of this world. Everything in this world, perhaps with a few exceptions, which we'll discuss, there might be certain philosophical truths which would never expire. And so, there might be certain philosophical items like numbers that would exist in any universe and don't appear to decay with time. But that's another subject. For the most part, everything in this world is being rent asunder by time. Now, if you want to really experience God, it makes sense that you would start with something philosophical and theoretical and abstract, and then move towards something more experiential, more complete, more concrete. You follow that? You get that? That makes sense. But then, if you want to experience divinity fully, it's not just rainbows and unicorns. For the most part, people have an easy time being grateful when things are good. I'm grateful to Krishna because he introduced me to the boy of my dreams, or the girl of my dreams, or gave me a child, or made me wealthy, or whatever it might be. Generally speaking, when things are going our way, and going our way means going the way we decided they should go. As you know, one of 7.5 billion people on the planet, we have our little worldview of how the movie of our life and the reality of the world should play out. And when the world goes the way we want to go, then we're like, okay, Krishna, you get to be God. You give me everything I want. And so it's like easy for me to believe in divinity, easy for me to feel grateful, because everything's happening just as I want it to. You follow this? I don't know how deep that such gratitude runs. I don't think it runs very deep. But if you want to really experience divinity, then you have to be able to see divinity in all things, which also means you have to be able to see the spirituality in suffering, disease, death, and destruction. A lot of people can't cope with this. They start to think that God must be evil because people are suffering, and then they decide there's no God. Or they say, no, God's good, but people are bad. People do all the bad stuff. But then they don't bother doing an important piece of arithmetic. What's the important piece of arithmetic that will also lead you to lose faith in God? God created people, but gave us free will, and we do all this horrible stuff to each other, and God can't do anything about it. If God can't do anything whatsoever about the suffering in this world, and we're truly all alone, then A, on one hand, it doesn't really matter whether God exists because there's absolutely no utility to us whatsoever. He's like an impotent eunuch sitting off on a cloud somewhere, totally incapable of doing anything for you, so why waste your time on him? That's number one. Number two, could you conceive of a universe where God gave everybody free will, but also arranged that everybody only got what they deserved? And as people wanted to execute their free will and do things, God arranged them to meet up with people who deserve to have those things done to them, so that nobody ever got something other than what they deserved. Could you fathom a universe where an all-good, all-powerful God could arrange the world like that, where everybody got what they deserved, and people also executed their free will, but God made the whole thing work and put everything together? Could you imagine such a world? Therefore, if God didn't create such a world, he's all of a sudden not all good because he didn't create the best of all possible worlds. Do you follow this? So just saying God's weak and impotent, can't do anything, can't help you, you're all alone in this world, it creates a functional atheism, which then pretty quickly leads to a philosophical atheism. If you want to truly be a believer, if you want to truly experience God, you got to learn to see Krishna in everything. And that means you got to learn to see Krishna in the suffering, in the pain, in the confusion, in the death, in the disease, in the destruction. So when Arjuna was actually experiencing God, philosophically, he had to wrap his head around both too. That's why Krishna said, I'm the light, the sun, the moon. And he said, I'm death. He gave you both. You follow? And then when Krishna was actually showing Arjuna, and Arjuna was experiencing Krishna in toto, Arjuna experienced both a bright, happy-go-lucky side, 1,000 suns rising at once, and he also experienced the gnashing jaws of death with the heads of the fallen warriors stuck in between the teeth, and legions, living entities flying like moths into a fire, into the mouths of the divine creator who's also the divine destroyer, and everything in between. Now sometimes when people are suffering a little bit, they take shelter of God. Sometimes when they're enjoying a little bit, they take shelter and have gratitude. Usually if you enjoy too much, you get pretty forgetful pretty quick. And usually if you suffer too much, you get pretty forgetful pretty quick too. It's hard. It's hard to keep that vision. But if we want to have unflinching devotion and an unflinching vision of divinity and an unceasing vision of divinity, then things have to happen in our life that would make it cease and that would make us flinch. And we have to learn and cultivate the fine art and science of how to stay steady when everybody's losing their head around you and they're blaming it on you. You have to get to that place where you keep your head above the fray. So Arjuna's experience, which is recorded here in the Gita, is extremely important because we are going to have to learn to appreciate and witness and see Krishna in the destruction. It's funny because, it's like if Krishna doesn't get you that job or get you that business deal or make your favorite stock go up or make your favorite stock go down in price so you can buy it and then go up, or get you the job you want, or get you pregnant, or find you the guy or the girl of your dreams, or whatever. If Krishna doesn't do all that, then we start to get really challenged in our faith. You follow? But how about you're going to get old and die, and everything in this world is going to get old and die, and all the things you're attached to materially are going to be ripped away from you by the tide of time. You follow? Time and tide. But we can also call it the tide of time. Like a powerful wave that just blasts everything. It's like you're on the Titanic and it's sinking and you're all going to die, right? But then you'll have faith in Krishna if the band plays your favorite song on the radio, like on like the band, they had the band playing when the Titanic was sinking. If the band happens to play your favorite tune, you follow? Then it's like, okay, then Krishna's God. You follow? Or was the last meal they served your favorite meal? Then Krishna's God. You know what I mean? Or did the pretty girl smile at you like as you were drowning? Then Krishna's God. But the larger picture that everything is going to be ripped apart, somehow we don't think about that. We have such a hard time with like little small things that go wrong in our life. Ignoring the fact that everything is going to go wrong. Like we freak out sometimes. I remember I was in Vrindavan. This was in 1991. I was in Vrindavan. I tell this story very occasionally. I was in Vrindavan in 1991. I was on the Brajmandal Parikrama, which is a 30-day walking tour of the 12 forests of Vrindavan to all of the primary holy places associated with Krishna, all throughout Brajmandal, the larger area of Vrindavan. That's 168 square miles. And we would walk 20 kilometers a day on average, and we would stay in these different places. And we never went to the Krishna Balaram temple the whole month. we were just walking around Vrindavan, 50 miles from the temple, walking, a big crew of us. And then we'd cook on site. There was, 1,000 devotees there. They would cook on site. We'd wake up in the morning, have Mangalarti, and then walk and do kirtan. And then, go to various pastime places and see all the amazing things that are Vrindavan, all the places where our lineages, lived for hundreds and thousands of years and relished the pastimes of Krishna. So we were in a place called Kokilavan, Kokilas, cuckoos. So it's the forest of cuckoos. It's just on the border of Vrindavan. If you ever drive from Delhi to Vrindavan with me, we get to a town, and it's not Mutt. It's oh gosh, I'm embarrassed. It's not Dig. It's not Mutt. There's a town, and that's the town. You go over this little bridge, and now you're in Braj Mandala. Anyway, when I'm driving around, sometimes I'll be like, okay, now we just are on the Delhi-Agra highway, and I'm like, now we entered Vrindavan. And so we were just on the border, just like right on the border, like, leaving Vrindavan and just getting into like, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. And what happened?
I need to change phones. The Laguna Beach temple is going to die.
Okay. And so then, can you plug it in?
No.
Okay. So we stopped at this Goshala, which is a place where they protect cows. And, we stayed there overnight. Like a lot of us, 1,000 of us stayed there overnight. And I watched a cow die. So I was 19, and I watched this cow die. And I remember thinking, maybe I was 20. No, I was 19. I was 19, I watched this cow die. And I remember thinking, this poor animal, like I'll chant Hare Krishna to it while it dies. And so I sat there, 6, 7 hours chanting to this cow as it left this world. And at some point, I had the realization, like, who should be feeling sorry for who? I'm some 19-year-old, wet behind the ears kid who made it to Vrindavan, who's going to go back to the West, who knows what awaits me there. This cow is dying in the holy land of Vrindavan, peacefully, having lived a life of service. And like, who should really be feeling sorry for who? And we've got this like, we feel sorry for old people. You're old people. We still feel sorry for little kids. You're a little kid. Like 5 minutes ago you were a little kid. 5 minutes from now you're going to be an old person. And in between you think you're something else, but you were never that. Any more that you weren't that, and any more that you're not that. You're just traveling through all these different bodies, and somehow you think what you've got going on is the best thing in town, and you look at everything else with a bit of xenophobia and maybe a little bit of intrigue as well. But you got to eventually have a vision that we're all in this charnel house where everything that we get attached to is literally ripped away from us in due course of time. Ground away from us. Even our own body gets taken away from us. Even our own mind sometimes gets repossessed. Instead of worrying about like moths flying into the flame, or heads caught between the teeth, or reversals you've suffered in life, just sit down one day and think about the nature of this world where everything dies, everything is taken away, nothing lasts. You spend your entire life putting together a list of names, and you just end up burning at the end because nobody even cares. It doesn't even matter anymore. You follow? At some point you got to wrap your head around that. Contend with that. Reconcile that with divinity. Once you do that, the little stuff is seen for what it is, as little stuff. It's kind of like, to give you an example, imagine if you had a really pesky hangnail, and you were really bent out of shape at your hangnail as you waited in line to have your arm cut off. So you're waiting in line at the arm cut off store, and they were going to cut your arm off. You follow? And you got a little hangnail. Maybe there's a little tiny drop of blood there on your hangnail. And you're messing with it, and there's no clippers around, and you're like, oh, this is really bugging me. As you wait in line at the arm cut off store. And if you just stop looking at yourself and look, you'll see people getting their arms cut. You can count. There's 8 people in front of you, and you're going to get your arm cut off in 8 people, and you can time the whole thing and figure it out. And that's happening. There's no way to get out of it. You're on a roller coaster to getting your arm cut off, and you're in the roller coaster, and it's going, and there's no way out. And you obsess over this little thing. In this just diseased state of myopia. Because seeing the big picture is just too much for you. Like we're told the, pre-civilized people were when they saw airplanes. Like we are when we can't recognize the break in patterns and optical illusions. We just can't open our minds up and see it. That's why I've spent some time in the last few weeks talking about things like forgetfulness is actually a blessing. Time is a blessing. Resets are a blessing. And the normal things that we think of as being evidences of God's deficiency in creating this world are actually totally consistent with an all-good deity who lets us forget, who lets us start over again, lifetime after lifetime. Where we still get the credit for what we did, we still get the blame for what we did, but we're able to kind of, at least on some level, hit the reset button, because otherwise it would just get to be too crushing, the weight. Sometimes the weight of what you've done in this lifetime gets crushing. The weight of the mistakes you made in this lifetime gets crushing. Sometimes the most merciful thing you can do is just get a fresh start. Okay. So now that we've done that, Arjuna says in text 31, chapter 11, text 31, 478 in my book. Grab a book. Page 478, chapter 11, text 31. O Lord of Lords, so fierce of form, please tell me who you are. I offer my obeisances unto you. Please be gracious to me. You are the primal Lord. I want to know about you, but I do not know what your mission is. That's as Arjuna started to see that Kala Roop, the form of time, he loses it. And then Krishna says, time I am, the great destroyer of the world. Kalo asmi lokakshayakrit pravridham. That's the verse that Oppenheimer quoted in Sanskrit when the first hydrogen bomb went off. Kalo asmi. Kalosmi. Kala means time. Asmi means I am. Becomes kalosmi. Lokakshay krit, the destroyer of the world. Pravridham, the powerful destroyer of the world. Loka samahartum iha pravrittaha. And I'm here in this world to destroy everything. That's my purpose. I've come here to destroy all people. With the exception of you, all the soldiers here on both sides will be slain. And therefore, get up, prepare to fight, win glory, conquer your enemies, enjoy a flourishing kingdom. They're already put to death by my arrangement, and you can be but an instrument in the fight. The fact that everything is going to crumble around you. So what can you hold on to? You can hold on to your duty. You can hold on to your integrity. And you can find satisfaction in that. You can find shelter from the storm of life in finding a sense of purpose, in being a part of something bigger than yourself, in having a purpose that isn't just selfish and egotistical, in having integrity, in having honor, in having values that you've cultivated, in having a code that you live by. Arjuna's was to protect and to fight. So instead of just getting paralyzed by this, get up and do your duty. Do what you're put here to do. Sometimes you find like there's like a war that can't be won, and the final soldiers just are like, okay, let's go down fighting. There's no way out. We're fighting a forest fire. There's no way we're going to be saved by the forest fire. So what do? Just keep on fighting the forest fire. It's not that you're futilely building sand castles in the sand, only to have the tide take them away. It might look like that externally, because that's what everybody else is doing. It might look externally like the devotees are building sand castles in the sand, just like the Machos are. We put our name on a building, we build a church, and then COVID comes and shrinks our congregation by 80%. And the church eventually falls down. How are we any different than the idiot who puts his name on a building up on the hill, and then the land is still there and he's buried on the land, but he thinks he owns it, but he actually doesn't. Nobody owns anything. How's it any different? It might look externally like the devotees are also just building sand castles, only to have the tide come in and just destroy them. And sometimes you get people like, it sounds sexy, like when you think about it for 2 seconds, if you're super shallow. It's like, yeah, it's the beauty of life. You just don't be attached. It's like a Buddhist thing. The Buddhists sometimes do these beautiful drawings in sand and they just let them fall apart. And it's like, it tells you something about the temporary nature of the world. You follow? But there's a difference between the devotee's sandcastle and even the Buddhist monks' mandalas made out of colored sand and whatever ingredients they use. And people working in this world, trying to make their way, get rich, get famous, be successful. There's a big difference. Do you know what the difference is? Yeah?
The mentality behind it, the purpose.
I don't know. You have to now say what the different purpose is.
Okay.
You can't just say the mentality behind it.
So the difference between
Yell at me. Kim, give me a thumbs up if you can hear Varangi.
The difference between somebody that's building their own houses and thinking that they own it, and the devotees building a church, for example, is that they're doing that in a way to serve God and serve other people by connecting and using that building to bring people to the higher truth, in comparison to somebody else that thinks that they own stuff. It's like for their own satisfaction, for their own, I guess, to cover themselves further in illusion, thinking that they own that that's for them and that it's eternally going to be for them or their family.
Nick, did you hear all that? You did good. I don't think you quite nailed it. Does anybody think she missed it a little bit? You got to yell at me.
Well, the difference is that, like, us building a temple and doing, like, from the outside it looks the same. It's like building up the street.
Can you hear this, Nick? Yeah? Louder.
But even though it looks like we're doing the same thing, the ultimate purpose is to connect with God versus what a materialist might be doing. It could be for a host of other reasons, but they're
Did you say what she just said?
I did, but I think she was more straightforward.
Yeah, you didn't quite say it that way. As you were speaking, it's like, we're doing this for other people and to help other people, but they're just doing it for themselves. Well, then I could be an atheist humanist, a secular humanist who's doing philanthropic work to help people, and then I would be the same as you. You follow?
Yeah.
The critical line of demarcation is that all the moves the devotees make when they're building sandcastles in this world are bringing them closer to Krishna, with whom they have an eternal connection. That's why they're doing what they do. It looks like a sandcastle, and then the tide comes in and washes it away. But they're actually building a castle out of diamonds in the spiritual world that doesn't decay. They're building a relationship with Krishna that is transcendental, that doesn't decay, that doesn't get washed away. Externally, they're making moves, and they appear to be subject to time like everybody else, but they're moves of connecting with divinity through love, through bhakti, through devotion, and through the reciprocal grace. Bhakti is how we feel about Krishna, and his love back towards us is grace. That loving connection between us and divinity lasts forever. Does your love last forever? No. You guys are going to die. Your love doesn't last forever. You follow? When you start, that's somewhat theoretical. It's a theoretical but intriguing idea. And so you go for it. It's theoretical, but it makes enough sense, and it's intriguing, so you go for it. But eventually, just like Arjuna, you begin to experience that. Krishna is no longer theoretical. You've met a few times. You know that he's real. And you feel that relationship growing. And you experience it. It makes sense, it's logical, you can make arguments for it. But you also experience it. Even the Buddhists, they're making that design. But they're not like some sensualist bohemians who are making that design. They're trying to train themselves. Nothing in this world lasts. And just to prove it, we're going to put a bunch of time in, knowing it's going to be taken away. Just to rivet that in our heads, that we are not these bodies, that nothing in this world lasts. We're like materialists, like, well, let's just see, they do the sexy art, and they don't care, this is going to be taken away. And like, what does it matter? A one-night stand, it's still love for a night. And for that night, we loved each other, and it was real. It was as real as any love's ever been for that one night when we slept together. It was the best thing ever. Spoken like a drunk fool who's never experienced real love. You get it? They just assume that like their pathetic experience of the world is all there is. Because they've never dug any deeper. Like the frog in the well. Let's go in the ocean. How big's the ocean? It's really big. Is it as big as my well? It's way bigger. How much bigger? Twice as big? No, it's like infinitely bigger. No, it couldn't be. It's just you're lying. You follow? There's room for both. There's room for both logical, reasonable arguments, and there's room for experiential divinity. Both things. Philosophy without that spiritual experience is dry, and that spiritual experience without the philosophy is shallow. You need both. Cicero said one time that, and it usually gets translated, here's how it gets translated nowadays. It gets translated as, Gratitude is not, you guys know who Cicero is? Roman statesman, lived about a century before Jesus. Super famous. And in a lot of ways, the entire Renaissance period, like the whole monster Renaissance that we went through, was to a large extent the rediscovery of Cicero's works and his philosophy and people digging into it and getting into it. So they rediscovered this stuff in the 14th century and kind of fomented the Renaissance. Anyway, so Cicero said, he was a philosopher and a statesman and so on and so forth. Member of the Senate. He said that gratitude is not only the greatest of all virtues, it's the parent of all virtues. Narcissism is the idea that I'm entitled and everything is about me and I deserve everything and everything revolves around me. Gratitude is really the opposite emotion. It's feeling like you've been given something more than what you deserve. It's a feeling of indebtedness that's voluntary because you feel beholden to and obliged to people who have done stuff for you more than what you could have possibly deserved. That's gratitude as an emotion. So Cicero's famous, this beautiful quote, gratitude is not only the greatest of all virtues, it's the parent of all of them. How far out is that? Because without that gratitude, the other virtues won't stick. They won't hold. They won't become strong. They won't be concrete. Really, bhakti is gratitude towards Krishna. And grace is Krishna's gratitude towards us. And gratitude isn't an effect, it's the tool. You should cultivate gratitude so that you will feel gratitude. Do you understand? It's not the effect. It's not like you do something else in life and then you feel grateful. The practice is practicing feeling grateful. In positive psychology, gratitude exercises are like all the rage. Anyway, Cicero's quote actually, what he really said was being grateful and showing it is not only the greatest of all virtues, it's the parent of all of them. You have to be it, you have to feel it, and you have to show it. There's a cognitive aspect and a behavioral aspect. If you just think it but you don't show it, you follow? It's just masturbatory. If you just show it but you don't feel it, it's fake. It's hypocritical. It's duplicit. You got to feel it and you got to show it. This 11th chapter is Arjuna getting a lesson in how to feel grateful to Krishna for death and time and disease and reversal and everything being ripped away. The only way you can learn this lesson is if you attach yourself to something deeper. Otherwise you're drowning and there's no way to just stop trying to push your head up. There has to be something bigger. There has to be some other way that you're breathing. There has to be some other way that you're experiencing love and joy so you can let go of this body. Go, open the door. So you can let go of this body and not be just hopelessly attached to it. Do you follow this? And so as long as you're here, do my bidding. The war's already done. You got to do to protect people. Get back to it. But you're not getting back to it just as for yourself. You're doing it as my instrument. You're doing it as service. You're doing it to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Do you follow this? Drona, Bhishma, Jayadratha, Karna, the other great warriors, have already been destroyed by thee. Therefore kill them and do not be disturbed. Simply fight. You'll vanquish your enemies in battle. Obviously, the big thing you got to do at this point is defend the concept of a holy war. I explained this before. I'll explain it again very briefly. If you believe that violence is ever the right thing to do, you've been signed out because your account is signed in from another device. Can you still see me, Nick? All right. If you believe that violence is ever the right thing to do in any circumstance, for instance, if somebody was murdering someone next to you and you had to use violence to protect that person, or someone was attacking you and you had to defend yourself, or someone was attacking a child, you had to defend the child. If you believe that violence is ever required in any circumstance ever, and it's the right thing to do, right? Then if God was all good and all powerful, God would also approve of that violence. And there is a place for violence in the world, which is why it exists. The only way you can make the argument that a holy war is just automatically bogus is if you believe that violence is never the right thing to do. That means if there's like 1 million children being killed in front of you right at this moment, and you're the only one to protect them, and you have to stop that person by like shooting them, you would prefer not to do it and let those 1 million children be killed. That's the only way you can not hypocritically make the argument that violence can never be justified. If violence is justifiable, that would mean that God would approve of you sometimes doing violence. Because if it was justified, if there's rules we have, defending people for like self-defense, or to protect others, we believe in the police force, which is there to protect other people who are not able to protect themselves. If you believe in any of that stuff, then you believe ultimately that God would approve of that because that's the right thing to do. And therefore there's at least theoretically the possibility of a war that was sanctioned by divinity. Do you guys follow that? You could go a step further, and we could think about Cat has some food. My family will die if I don't get that food. And Cat tells me there's no way he's going to give me that food. And my family's going to die. Am I justified in fighting Cat for the food? Probably. What if Cat's got a family and they're going to die if he doesn't keep that food? And if he gives me the food, his family's going to die. Is he justified fighting me back? He is. Would we both be justified fighting each other for those resources in that circumstance? Do you follow that? It's important when we're trying to think of the morality of God that we start with our own morality. And we don't subject God to some standard of morality that becomes so impossible to conceive of that like it would never exist in the world. And so we extrapolate from our own understanding of morality, and then we assume that God would approve of that. Just like we assume that God would approve of self-defense, and God would approve of people fighting to protect their homeland. Or if people were being genocidally wiped out, that would be okay to defend against that. You follow? So we have here a full-blown holy war. Duryodhana and company are murdering millions of people. And the only people there are this small band of warriors that can protect them, hopelessly outnumbered. And they have to go out on the battlefield and fight. And Arjuna doesn't want to. He's lost his nerve. It all seems so pointless. He doesn't know what to do. But at a certain point, you just got to jump. And Krishna's encouraging him. But now Arjuna's not merely fighting and everybody's going to die anyway and everything's going to be rent asunder anyway. Arjuna's fighting, and through that fighting, he's connecting with Krishna, which is something enduring and permanent. And therefore, externally, the devotee looks like they're building sandcastles, just like everybody else, only to be taken away by time and tide. But in reality, the sandcastle is not what's going on. The devotee is building their relationship with Krishna. Now, are any of us going to have to fight in a holy war in our lifetimes? Probably not. But if it's true even in this circumstance, then how much more true is it when you have to raise a family and work your job and start a business and grow old gracefully and let go? The sensationalism of Arjuna's experience, the larger-than-life nature of Arjuna's experience means that when we look at our own lives, we can easily locate ourselves under that umbrella. You follow? If this is true even in Arjuna's circumstance, where he was committing violence, it was kings, and he had to fight against his own relatives, how much more true is it for us when we just take out the trash in the morning and be nice to our spouse? You follow this? Arjuna said, then O king, after hearing these words from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the trembling Arjuna offered obeisances with folded hands again and again. He fearfully spoke to Lord Krishna in a faltering voice as follows. So what's Arjuna going to do now? Let's find out. O master of the senses, the world becomes joyful upon hearing your name, and thus everyone becomes attached to you. Although the perfected beings offer you their respectful homage, the demons are afraid, and they flee here and there. All of this is rightly done. What did Arjuna do there? Hey, Madhuri, can you go tell them to be quiet? Thank you. Like silent, no more basketball. Thank you. Quick, run, run, run. What's Arjuna doing there? Let me read it again. O master of the senses, the world becomes joyful upon hearing your name, and thus everyone becomes attached to you. Although the perfected beings offer you their respectful homage, the demons are afraid and they flee here and there. All of this is rightly done.
Seems like he's seeing a complete understanding of what's going on in the world and why.
Yeah. He fully agrees. He says sthane. Sthane comes from sta. It means like this is like properly situated. This is rightly done. This is appropriate. So he says like, yes, I get it. And he's saying some people who get it, they're offering their prayers to you, seeing the carnage and destruction, they're able to see the beauty of it, the truth of it, the value of it. Others who are just attached and can't wrap their heads around the bigger picture, they're just running hither and thither, bewildered and disturbed. You guys follow that? O great one, greater even than Brahma, you are the original creator. Why then should they not offer their respectful obeisances to you? O limitless one, God of gods, refuge of the universe, you are the invincible source, the cause of all causes, transcendental in this material manifestation. You are the original personality of Godhead, the oldest, the ultimate sanctuary of this manifested cosmos, cosmic world. You are the knower of everything, and you are all that is knowable. You are the supreme refuge above the material modes, a limitless form. The whole cosmic manifestation is pervaded by you. You are air, you're the supreme control, you're fire, you're water, you're the moon, you're Brahma, the first living creature, you're the great grandfather. That's Bhishma Dev. I therefore, is it the great grandfather? Let me see here. Pratpitamaha. Yeah, it means the great grandfather. We don't know who he's referring to. Probably not Bhishma. It's funny, he's saying you're Brahma, and he's saying you're the great grandfather. Like, who's left? Brahma's the first created being. It's a little like, it kind of just means like, if Brahma's our father, then you're the father of the father, the father of the father of the father. It's like the greatest thing you can think of, the oldest, the most primordial, the most original being. It can't mean Bhishma, because they already trumped Bhishma by talking about, you follow? Okay. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto you 1,000 times, and again, and yet again. It's beautiful. Namo namaste. Namaste means respects to you. Te means to you. Namaha means respects. When you take namaha and te, respects you, it becomes namaste. Then namo namaste. Namaha namaha te. So namaha namahate, respects to you, becomes namo namaste. The H in front of the T becomes S, and then the H in front of the N becomes O. It's a namo namaste. Astu. Let there be respects to you. again and again. Sahasra kriya, sahasra kritva, made 1,000 times. Purnaschabuya, and again. Chabuyo api namo namaste, and again. My respects to you. Respects you from the front, from behind, from all sides. O unbounded power, you're the master of limitless might. You're all pervading in us. You're everything. So we'll leave it there. But you see what's happened here. Arjuna theoretically wanted to be able to know God in this world. Then he wanted to experience God. Krishna gave him a vision, but that vision he gave him was both happy and sad. It included both lights and rainbows and unicorns, and also death and destruction, because that's actually the nature of the world. If you want to reconcile the world with divinity, you have to be able to find meaning and value even in suffering. And Arjuna was spun when he first saw it. And then Krishna explained it. That I govern the world through time. And you have your little thing, and you can be connected to me while doing your duty, and go and do your duty, and don't lament. And I'll take care of the rest. You just do you. You just do your little part. And use that as a way to connect with me. And the result of that information was that Arjuna found peace. To some extent. He gets bewildered again in a second. That'll be next week's teaching. And you hear it. He's like peaceful. Stane. It's okay. I get it. Namo namaste. My respects to you. From all sides. From the front, from the rear. You're the greatest. I get it. Some people get it. Some people don't. Now I understand. I'm no longer disturbed. I see the big picture. The result of fathoming Krishna as the soul of the universe is that Arjuna had to reconcile pain, suffering, and death and find meaning and value in it. And you see here in these prayers somebody who's just peaceful with it, who can let go gracefully, who can glide through this world and move through this world gracefully. Thank you, IGTV. Thank you, Faith.